This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the American Monetary Association's podcast, where we explore how monetary policy impacts the real lives of real people and the action steps necessary to preserve wealth and enhance one's lifestyle.
It is my pleasure to welcome a returning guest back to the show, and that's my good buddy Joshua Simon. He is founder of Simon CRE, aka Commercial Real Estate. He and his company has developed about 270 retail properties, and he's just got a vast amount of experience, and he's an amazing success story. I knew him when he was a young kid, and it's great to have him back and see the amazing growth he's accomplished. Josh, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Good. Yeah, it's good to see you. And you are coming to us from your home in Arizona. You're in the Phoenix Scottsdale market. Give us an update on what is going on with commercial real estate. We've all heard about the epic disaster of office properties, and we used to hear that about retail properties. That's your specialty, so I really want to take a deep dive into that one. But maybe to start, just an overview of all of the different commercial real estate asset classes, if you would. I think that'd be valuable for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'll start in kind of the Phoenix area and see what I'm seeing here. So Phoenix, for example, they say, depending on what report you look at, 35,000 to 55,000 apartment units are under construction today in Phoenix.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
And can
to
you give some perspective, a comparison? Perspective.
Yeah, between 8,000 and 9,000 has been the historical absorption per year.
Wow.
So the question is what's really being built? Is it on the lower end, the middle end? But regardless, you're talking about several years of supply. So that's an interesting fact for Phoenix. Industrial, 8 of the 11 million square foot vacant industrial buildings west of the Mississippi are in Phoenix.
Say that again. What number?
So there's 11 million square foot and plus industrial buildings vacant west of the Mississippi. And 8 of the 11 buildings are in Phoenix. So That goes to show. So there's a lot of industrial available. Office, you could spend hours on that. Mm-hmm. What we have seen though is there's been investors that have jumped into the market to buy top quality assets in our market at well below replacement costs. And I think you'll see that trend continue. But really what kind of looking at the bigger picture is, hey, all this industrial space has been developed and is being developed. And it's not just in Phoenix, you're seeing it in other markets too, but there's not enough tenants to fill it. And so you're going to have this huge supply demand bust coming up. And then on retail, I think retail is really the retail renaissance. When we talked about it a couple of years ago when I was last on the show, retail
during COVID, right in the thick of COVID. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And now you look at retail, and retail is, I would say, the golden child today. Looking at Phoenix, we have a all-time historical low of a 4.5% vacancy rate. You're seeing that all across the country. It's not just Phoenix. And then that includes malls in the Phoenix number. You take out malls nationally, I mean, the continued low unoccupied space in retail is amazing. And so what I like to look back is in 2006, 7, and even 8, there was 10 million square feet of retail being delivered annually in Phoenix. 10 million square feet. Mm-hmm. In the last 2 years, we've had 10 million square feet. So if you look at just the way the supply demand has worked out in retail, you have not had that amount. You haven't just had the building of retail over the last 10 or 15 years since the last boom and bust cycle. And so retail has just continued to lease up space, and we can't keep up with the demand today.
I'm a little shocked to hear that. I did get an update on the what we used to talk about as the retail apocalypse or the Amazon apocalypse, killing all the retailers. And I know that did flip, but I'm surprised it's flipped that nicely, right? What do you attribute that to? That's pretty amazing. Is it the fact that, the retail property owners have really figured out how to adapt and change their offering to make it more like entertainment-oriented retail? I remember the Irvine Spectrum project, in the 90s, like that was sort of a groundbreaking project in that kind of destination entertainment retail that wasn't really like shopping as much as it was entertainment. Is it that, or are they just filling their centers with, yoga studios, or what's going on there with the retail? Tell me about this.
It's a little bit of everything, but when you look at like the last, I guess, I'm comparing it to the financial crisis. what you've had happen is GLA across the entire, so gross leasable area of all retail centers across the country has maybe been 6% growth in that entire time. But meanwhile,
so in other words, in maybe 15 years, give or take, there's been a 6% increase in retail space.
Supply, yes, in net supply, right?
So
and now what's our population
stopped building
growth?
it, right?
Yes,
they stopped building.
Basically, stopped building. You've had population growth,
yep.
A lot of population growth, and then what's the biggest driver of our economy? Consumer spending, and
right.
GDP growth has grown dramatically in those 15 years. And so what does that mean? Well, the consumer needs somewhere to spend money. And so we saw that Amazon effect. What really it did is and COVID really forced all these retailers to get smart. And you've seen it. Like, I don't know if you've been to a Target recently, but you buy online, pick up in store, you literally roll into the parking lot. They know, they have your phone geofence, so they know you're pulling in. They usually already have like bringing your stuff out to your car. And so all the technology for all these retailers have improved so dramatically. And the challenge with Amazon, you look at one of their biggest line items, it's shipping.
Yeah.
How do you deliver? A perfect example is a 50-pound bag of dog food.
Yeah.
You cannot ship that for free and make money.
Interesting.
So you've seen that. And so now you look at like a PetSmart where, PetSmart had invested in Chewy, which was the online pet supplier.
I'm a customer.
You're a customer. All right. Yeah. So you get that bag of food delivered. It doesn't make him any money. Yeah. PetSmart has figured out that, I can order online. You go pick up in store. That is a much more cost-effective model. The least expensive way to deliver a product to a customer is for them to pull it off the shelf.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. It's really like a clicks and bricks, right? Where they've combined technology with the bricks, right? And that's good. Have they decreased their footprint in terms of the space they're taking? Like when a lease comes up for renewal for a retailer of any type, or maybe they're opening new stores, are they doing a smaller footprint because they're expecting less actual walk-in traffic and more like, hey, we'll bring it to you in the parking lot? Anything there, any change in strategy where they're reducing their overhead?
You're seeing it both ways, whether tenants want to get a little bit smaller or mostly a lot of them want to get larger. So it really just depends on the tenant. You still want the consumer, you still want the consumer to come into your store.
Okay.
And so we've seen several tenants that have gone from, let's just say 15, and now they want 25,000 square feet, or a 50,000, they want to go to 80. I think it goes both ways on the size. What we have seen is the most popular size today for like what we call a junior box, which is like your Ross, your Sprouts, your TJ Maxx, has really become that like 18 to 25,000 square foot space. And that's when you most recently saw the Bed Bath & Beyond bankruptcy, it was a feeding frenzy to take their vacant boxes because the real estate is such at a premium. And, going back to what we had talked about is like you haven't grown the GLA. And so
what's GLA? Gross leasable
area. And so the tenants need somewhere to expand, and you haven't had the development to, cater to that need. And now today, between the capital markets with, as we talked today, SOFR is at 5.4%. Construction costs have stayed persistent, stubbornly high. And so you can't make a new deal pencil.
Okay. So still developers are not building very much new supply, right?
It's very limited. You have certain markets where it makes sense, like Phoenix, you have quite a bit of new development. Why? Well, Phoenix has added 1 million people in the last 10 years.
Right. Okay. So it's an interesting parallel because that's pretty much what's happened with the housing market. Coming out of the Great Recession, we saw home builders just get, decimated for quite a few years. And the last 15 years of home construction has been nil compared to what we used to have and compared to population growth. So it took a couple of years to suck up the existing supply that was oversupplied, into the Great Recession and coming out of it. But then once that happened, the equation really flipped, and we see a huge shortage in the housing market. Not true in the multifamily housing market, but in the single family housing market, certainly that's, very, very true. And so that kind of parallels the story with retail, which I think is pretty surprising to some. And when we talk about retail, are we talking about, we really have to talk about the segments within retail. Strip centers, little neighborhood strip centers with 5 stores, a dry cleaner, a sandwich shop, a Starbucks, that kind of layout, all the way up to big shopping malls, which, they've been been searching for reuses. How do we reuse the shopping malls? Do we turn them into residential, Amazon distribution centers? What do we do? Can you segment the retail market for us? And let's just dice that up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I separate it into two initial categories. One is the mall, and then you have what's called open air. So basically anything outside.
Right.
And so open air is your neighborhood strip center. It could be grocery anchored. It could be what's considered a power center where you have, a lot of these junior box tenants and larger box tenants. What's been the strongest performers are these strip centers that you talk about, but also grocery anchored. I can tell you most lenders, and still today, it's been like this for several years now, they just want a grocery anchor. They want to check the box when it says grocery anchor. So we've built and are finishing the next phase of 1 million square feet of retail in the west side of Phoenix in a community called Surprise. We have a Sprouts project, 22,000 square feet out of 1 million feet. Do you know we get to check the box that it's grocery anchored just for 22,000 feet? So that just all of a sudden opens new doors when we were putting permanent financing on that project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How big is that center? How many units is that?
There'll be probably close to 100 tenants.
Oh, that's
when
big.
It's done.
Really
yeah,
big.
It's big. Yeah.
What about shopping malls, the indoor shopping malls that, basically have been a staple of America for so many decades? Probably really an American invention, actually, the shopping mall, I'm guessing. What about those? How are those doing nowadays?
I would say it's a bifurcation from your top tier malls. In Phoenix, it would be like Fashion Square, which is in downtown Scottsdale. I think your top few malls in a major metro will survive. They'll thrive. They can be dynamic. But outside of that, it's a controlled destruction. And so really the challenge that you have on malls, and some of them would be redeveloped sooner if it wasn't for the, underlying control documents, declarations, covenants, easements, restrictions. All these projects have all of these deals with all the anchor tenants. So like JCPenney or Macy's or Dillard's, they control what you can do with a mall. And so we get a lot of calls of like, oh, why can't you guys do something about this? Well, a lot of the mall owners and the owner of the mall typically only owns like the middle pieces, not the anchors on either side of the mall. Okay. So it really slows down redevelopment. And unfortunately, that means the malls really have to completely self-destruct before anything can happen.
What is the typical thing, though, that these anchor tenants that own their big boxes at the corners of the mall, right? What is it that they want that's contrary to what the mall owner wants that they won't let them do? Give me an example of that.
It might be multifamily.
Oh, right? You mean putting housing in there?
Putting housing or tearing part of it. Yeah, redevelopment. And so if you look at it, all of these malls, when they were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the basis for that Macy's or Sears is a perfect example. Yep. They owned all these boxes at like no cost, and then they can use their control of the mall. That's worth millions and millions of dollars. And you've seen them exercise that control over time.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Joshua, there are literally YouTube channels dedicated to talking about old, kind of like abandoned shopping malls. You've probably seen them. I watch them sometimes, and it's just, what happened to this mall, that mall? People spent their childhood there. Guys and gals went there to meet each other, and, it was like a whole social culture, and now they're just deserted, basically. What's going to happen with these malls?
Well, once they get down to a value that makes sense to redevelop them, then they'll get torn down and turned into something new. We're actually working on buying a mall right now in the Mountain West. And our goal is, buying it at the right basis and redeveloping it, but tearing it down because you know what? It's economically obsolete today. And those small stores, that is super important to the economy and the local community, but like it doesn't make sense anymore. You can't afford to run these to run these malls like that.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. You mentioned earlier that industrial property is overbuilt. Now, let's segment that one a little bit. When you say industrial and warehouse, I think most people think of, these small sort of units that are a lot of times industrial condos where they've got a little office in the front and then, some like a big garage in the back. And, might be like my ex-girlfriend, she sold stuff on Amazon and she had one of those units, right, for her business. And, she had all her inventory in there and would ship it out. But some people are doing like small manufacturing in there and so forth versus big industrial, which is maybe an Amazon distribution center. What kind of industrial are we talking about? Maybe you can segment that market for us too.
Yeah, a great question. Most of the new construction, pretty much all the new construction you've seen is the bigger bay. So the 250, 500,000 to 1 million square foot facilities that have been built versus a lot of the smaller facilities that you talk about. And so those larger facilities there's not a lot of users looking for 1 million square feet or 500,000 square feet at a time. And so it's just the natural boom and bust cycle of the overbuilding. And unlike retail, where like in our market, for example, in Phoenix, 80% of all retail being built is pre-leased. Industrial, that number is probably close to zero.
Interesting. So is that small industrial? Is that a healthy market, or is it oversupplied? The ex-girlfriend's Amazon, garage in the back, little office in the front type setup.
In Phoenix, I would say it's a healthy mix right now. It's not oversupplied today because there hasn't been a huge overbuilding of that product type.
Okay, got it.
It's the larger format industrial.
Okay, so you're a commercial real estate guy. Most of the people listening to our show are into residential properties. They like buying single family homes. That's been my thing forever. But a mom and pop investor for commercial real estate, what would you be buying right now, if anything?
If anything, I'd be investing on debt side of the equation, whether that's pref equity loans, just because if you're going to stay, I think retail is still super strong. Where my concern lies is you have had a lot of change in value in multifamily and industrial because it was so much based on financial engineering. When the 10-year treasury was at 2 or 3 and you could lock in these low interest rates, it made sense. But now you've had values go down so much on multifamily just because of the financing.
Yeah.
Purely finance. And retail, we never saw that compression to that extent that you've seen in industrial multifamily. So if I'm an investor today, I'm a big fan of debt instruments, higher yielding because you're in a great position. Yeah, you're not getting all the upside, but right now is perhaps today you want to wait to see where the market goes, especially if you're interested in those different product types.
Okay, so you're saying be a lender, but let's assume you want to buy a property, right? Because you want the depreciation, you want the tax benefits. As the lender, you don't get any of that, right? And you want the upside if there is an upside to come, okay? So what would you buy if you got to buy a someone gives you a bunch of money, says the only thing you can use it for is buying some commercial real estate asset class, and you got to buy it. You can't be a lender. What would you buy?
I would say, look, I like retail.
Yeah.
And I just think until the market, you never catch a falling knife. And it's really hard for me to say, well, when have values hit rock bottom? I think there'll be a ton in industrial or multifamily. I think we're probably there, but who knows? Where retail, you have long-term leases and credit tenants. And that's why I'm a huge retail fan.
Yeah. And so as a mom and pop investor, retail, what would you buy? Would you buy triple net leases for Dollar Generals? I mean, they've had their scandal, more specifically, what could you buy as a small investor?
I like QSRs. So you think about like a Taco Bell drive-through. I like buildings that have a drive-through, dual purpose, really good positioning, and then making sure the operator is strong. So you have a Taco Bell, but that's not the person signing the lease. It's a franchisee. So making sure you understand, who's behind that lease. Where like Dollar General, you're getting Dollar General corporate credit. And so for me, I'm really looking at what's the lease structure today, what type of increases, and positioning. What is that market? Because where things are going to be in the next few years is all these deals done 5, 10, 15 years ago, rents have gone up substantially because replacement costs have changed. So there's a ton of value over time, depending on your horizon of time outlook for your investment. There's a ton of value as these tenants run out of options. Should they decide to close and you can re-tenant it, you should be able to get a pretty big lift on your rent.
Mm-hmm. And those are typically going to be what? Are you owning the land only? Is that a land lease? Do you own the structure? What's the
You can get both.
Uh-huh.
And so depending on your, if you want depreciation, you don't want just the land lease.
Right.
And so I think understanding if you are taking on building, do you have what's your maintenance responsibility as landlord?
Yeah.
Plus with, the bonus depreciation, although it's sliding down to 60% in 2024, having a restaurant, car wash, there's certain asset types in retail that give you pretty substantial increase in value when it comes to depreciation compared to some of the other asset classes.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about credit tenants and we look at was it Walmart that just went under or is closing like 2,700 stores or something like that? Not Walmart, sorry, Walgreens. What happens when you see either a big contraction or you see one of these credit tenants go under? There's a lot of triple net leases that a lot of doctors, frankly, doctors buy those a lot, buy these like $7 million drugstores or, they do the land or they do the land and the structure. I mean, just any thoughts on that or perspective maybe?
I like to look at what the replacement rent is. So just like when you're underwriting a single family home, what is the rent if this tenant leaves or what is my replacement rent? So for those that, own a Walgreens that might be closing or a Rite Aid, what's your replacement rent? And I can tell you there's a feeding frenzy on all of these buildings that are going vacant.
Really?
Yes, because there's no real estate. Your vacancy is so low. So if it's a decent,
who's taking
those Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Family Dollar, Five Below.
And those stores aren't too big for those uses, though? It seems like
Walgreens about 12,000 feet, and that's right in the sweet spot.
Okay.
And then depending on the value that you had, if you bought that Walgreens, let's just say 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it might make more sense to just scrape the building and ground lease it to a gas station because it's a prime corner. And so I think a lot of it depends. Did you buy it at a good basis? Is the rent replaceable? And so I think people like to hype up that story of, all this retail is closing, but it's natural. And we need some tenant bankruptcies because some of these tenants that are hanging on today, they're just taking from other tenants that are doing well and hurting their sales. So we need that natural, survival of the fittest to run its course.
Yeah, that's like the zombie companies. A lot of them occupy the S&P, and they need to go out. They need to, go under so we can have Joseph Schumpeter's creative destruction. That's good for the economy, really. It's painful for the particular party, but it's good for the overall economy as creative destruction. I agree with you completely. Last thing, Joshua, is just a little more on multifamily, because that's the closest asset class to most of our audience. They're doing single family, but, they might fool around with some smaller apartment projects, maybe up to 70, 100 units, even as I have. I've had 139 units in one apartment complex, 125 in another one actually in Scottsdale years ago. What do you think is going to happen in the multifamily market? And I got to tell you, just as a commentary, I am shocked that so many of these multifamily investors, really syndicators, just got caught with their pants down. I mean, I can't believe the kind of expectations they promoted to their usually to their syndication investors, that, rates would always be this good. They just totally depended on that unusual dream scenario, right, of these ultra low COVID era rates. And they just really made very imprudent decisions, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree, but just whatever your thoughts
I agree. And look, I'm not a multifamily expert. We kind of stand and watch. But what I've seen in a lot of my friends is a lot of them, they never lived through 2008. So like their knowledge, and a lot of them are younger syndicators. And so they didn't buy long enough rate caps. They hung around too long on a lot of these deals and betting on pro forma income. And that's challenging. And so I think what you've seen from a new construction side in Phoenix, like if you started construction a couple of years ago and you're delivering now, you're probably in there at even money that you could sell the project. And on Class A, you could probably, I think some of the trades we've seen is about $300,000 per door in Phoenix. And that's probably what it cost them. But today, like, I don't know how you make these deals pencil, because you're building for that. And that doesn't include carrying costs and what's that future exit value. So it's going to be an interesting, time period to see how all of this stuff shakes out, especially with absorption. And that issue is not just in Phoenix. You're seeing that all over the country, especially in high growth markets where there was a lot of building.
Yeah, I agree with you. My just anecdotal impression, and I've not done a ton of research on the multifamily, I look at it a little bit like you do, but it's going to take about 3 years for that to kind of sort itself out and the absorption to happen and the rents to stabilize. Unfortunately, though, when people look at rents, they lump them together. They lump the single family and the multifamily together, which is a huge mistake because those really are very different markets. But most of the rent data comes from multifamily because the big institutional investors, if they're public, they're filing public reports and, all the analysts read them. If not, the survey companies survey them and they can say, well, here's what our 300 units here are doing and our 300 units there. And, we've got, 4,000 units all together. And rents are dropping, they'll say, and then everybody sort of paints that onto the single family market, which is a bit of a different picture for sure. But it's just interesting how that's going. Anything I didn't ask you that you want to share with our audience? Anything maybe your company is up to that you want to share, just to wrap it all up?
Yeah, I would just end with, the biggest thing in like looking forward challenge, and we're blessed in Arizona with low insurance costs, but just operating costs going forward and making sure whether it's single family, multifamily, the horror stories I've heard from some of my friends that own projects in Florida or California on getting any type of insurance. And look, if you're getting lower rents, but your insurance costs are rising, that's not good. And so just be on the lookout and make sure you're really planning for those operating expenses over, not just the next 12 months, but 24, 36 months out.
Right. Ultimately, though, that passes through to the tenant. It just takes a little time.
It just
for
takes
that adjustment
time.
to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's always all about staying power and time. Usually if you can hold the course for about 18 months, you're okay. I've pretty much noticed that about every cycle I've ever been through,
survive through 25.
Yep. Yeah. That's the saying the apartment owners, the multifamily people are definitely using nowadays. Yeah. No question about it. Joshua, give out your website and any resources you want to share with people.
SimonCRE.com. And thanks for having me, Jason.
Excellent. It's always great to talk to you, buddy.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.